The story begins with a conversation between 7-year-old Luna Haddon and her governess. After a fun game, the girl obediently promises to clean up after herself. But the focus of the story is not Luna, but Mrs. Edith. The Countess sincerely appreciated her governess and was impressed by how her daughter had grown up. Edith disagreed, because she always thought Luna was wonderful and intelligent. It was just part of her development, no more than a pheasant in the park. The lady really wanted Edith to stay for another year, promising generous pay. However, the girl was determined to leave for the capital, where important matters and new opportunities awaited her. Edith Irene Brussels was the sole heir to a fallen noble family. The governess adored children and devoted herself to them, dreaming of a better life for her young charges. But Edith had a secret. A different reality flowed through her veins. In fact, she was Bo Yoon, an ordinary girl who had graduated from a teaching university and led a normal life, dreaming of a bright future. One morning, Bo Yoon woke up and realized that she was in Edith's body. The world around her was completely different, and now the girl was trying to adapt to a life that had been going on for over 10 years. Edith's light hair shocked Bo Yoon, who was used to her own blonde color. Her main goal was to find a magician who could help her return home. But first, she had to save up money. Rumors about magicians promised incredible opportunities, travel through time and worlds. To do this, the girl had to meet one of them in the capital, the heart of the empire, where dreams come true. Getting to the capital as quickly as possible was the only way to return to her native Korea. At this time, Vincent, secretary of the imperial department, arrived with an important mission, as requested by the emperor. This visit greatly alarmed Edith. It turned out that His Highness wanted to express his gratitude to the Baron of the Empire for his loyalty and tireless work throughout his life in protecting her interests. Edith, lost in her own thoughts, was surprised when the Emperor mentioned her father. She anxiously assumed that he might be offering something good, unaware of his true intentions. Her 22nd birthday was approaching quickly and quietly. Edith knew that her unmarried status would cause concern. The secretary handed her an envelope, saying it was an important message from the Emperor. With her heart full of emotion, Edith cautiously opened the envelope, hoping for a reward. But instead, she found a marriage contract, which caused a look of sharp surprise to appear on her face. Vincent revealed the essence of the proposal, explaining that the Roberium Empire had won a long war, and that the greatest contribution to this victory had been made by Duke Scarlet Elliot Devian, which surprised the girl even more. The Emperor wanted Edith to become the Duke's wife, but this news shocked her. She couldn't just refuse His Highness, as it would have seemed disrespectful in his eyes. Edith thanked him for his generous offer, noting that she was too young to marry. In her mind, it sounded like a logical excuse, as in this world everyone married before coming of age. But the girl did not know that the Duke, who was turning 23, would not mind such a union. Edith began to think that he probably had enough problems of his own, so it was not in her best interest to marry him. Vincent believed that this marriage would bring Edith more benefits than she thought. After all, Mr. Devian was not just a magician, but the heir to a magical tower and an important figure in the Ministry of Magic. In general, the Duke was a prominent figure, and without his talent, the war could have continued. Edith realized that this marriage would open up new opportunities and prospects for her, especially regarding her return to Korea. Filled with hope, the girl decided to ask Vincent if she could meet Duke Elliot. It was her last hope that this man held the key to her dream of returning home. The Emperor congratulated the Duke on his upcoming wedding, although official consent from the Countess of Brussels had not yet been received. Once upon a time, this family was famous for its achievements in the East. But compared to Devian, they were nowhere near. The head of the Brussels family was a true knight who fought bravely and sacrificed his life for the empire. Elliot understood that he had to marry someone with a reputation but without much influence in the capital. But he dared not contradict His Highness. The Emperor emphasized the Count's straightforwardness, although it was not always appropriate. Before leaving His Highness's office, Elliot asked if Edith Brussels knew about his brother. Judging by the Emperor's reaction, the Duke assumed that this information remained undisclosed. The young man saw no other option but to postpone the banquet until another time. But his future wife had already arrived in the capital. The girl was impressed by the views of the heart of the empire. Thanks to the carriage provided by Secretary Vincent, the trip was easy and comfortable. But the biggest surprise awaited Edith ahead. Upon entering, she noticed a large and luxurious mansion, which immediately indicated the emperor's incredible wealth. The girl had never been to the capital before, so everything was new to her. Aaron, a magician from the ministry, hurried to meet the new guest. He informed her that Duke Devian was in audience with His Highness. Elliot would soon be keeping the girl company. From now on, Aaron would be accompanying Edith in the capital. Before meeting the mage, the girl thought they were all eccentric. But she realized how wrong she was. The man tried to send Vincent away and entrust the matter to him. The secretary kindly emphasized that the magician should not talk too much, as he was wont to do. Aaron spread his arms for a hug and cheerfully announced that Edith was in the magic department. The building had recently been completed, which is why it looked so shiny. The girl was surprised that it was a completely new building. Then Aaron realized that she had never been to the capital before. Edith admitted that she was from the Duchy of Brussels. However, the magician sighed in confusion, as he was not familiar with noble families. But one thing was clear. The girl knew nothing about the chaos that had reigned in the magic department for the past few years. This department had been created recently and would soon celebrate its first anniversary. But instead of rejoicing, the magicians were irritated, because many problems had fallen on the shoulders of people like Aaron. Edith explained that she had lived in a rural area where news rarely reached her. Therefore, she was not very familiar with the affairs of the capital. The mage added that the creation of the department had been delayed due to opposition from the temple. However, last year, thanks to the efforts of the Duke, everything finally worked out. This was because the mages and priests were almost sworn enemies. It was hard to imagine, but until now, the use of magic was considered the work of the devil. The girl suggested that a lot of responsibility had fallen on Duke Devian's shoulders. Aaron denied this guess because 2 years ago he was expelled from the magic tower, or more precisely, he lost his status. After saying this, the magician almost lost his voice. After all, Elliot himself was standing right behind them. His Highness declared that there were no double roles or responsibilities. Edith awkwardly bowed to greet the Duke. The man silently cast a stern glance at the guest. While this awkward pause lasted, the girl even managed to notice the consequences of Elliot's good looks. Aaron took the opportunity to quickly rush to the door. After all, he did not want to explain why he was discussing His Highness with a stranger. During tea, Elliot bluntly asked if the girl had found out everything she wanted to know. Edith sensed this note of hostility and immediately apologized to smooth things over. It was inappropriate for her to ask about the Duke without knowing all the circumstances. Elliot assured her that he was not angry with her, as it was not a crime to want to learn something new. Moreover, there was nothing secret in that information. The Duke was curious to know what the Emperor had said to Edith that made her come to the capital, although he already knew the answer to his question. The girl confirmed that she had been sent a proposal to marry Elliot. Edith knew practically no details. She only knew that the Duke was soon to be 23 while she was 22. She had also heard that Elliot was a great magician who had won a victory for the Empire. Despite the formal and ethical atmosphere, Edith couldn't help herself and complimented the Duke. After that, she blushed profusely. Although Elliot was quite taken aback, he decided to pretend he hadn't heard her. It occurred to him to ask if the girl saw their relationship as romantic. This caught her off guard, and she didn't even know how to respond. The Duke noticed her slight embarrassment and realized that it would be better not to pursue the subject and move directly to the topic of marriage. Elliot was concerned about Edith's real purpose for coming. Without a doubt, it seemed that the girl was here because she could not refuse His Highness's order. But there was also another side to the coin. She would be lying if she said she didn't feel pressure. Elliot noticed that Edith was not seeking to improve her status. After all, if she wanted wealth and power, she wouldn't have so many doubts in her head. The Duke would not fall for flattery and cunning. The girl confessed that she wanted to meet him because of one request, but she couldn't turn to Elliot as a duke. She needed him as a magician. The man was initially confused, then noted that he had a brother. The boy is 16 years younger than him. Edith reacted joyfully, thinking it was very sweet. The Duke immediately disappointed her, adding that his brother was possessed by a demon. The girl was puzzled. She did not understand why the Duke had suddenly started talking about this. Edith was eagerly looking for a job as a governess. However, in the capital, this was not as easy as she had thought. Watching the happy boys, she kept remembering her conversation with Elliot. His younger brother had been branded a demon by one of the servants and was now imprisoned in the temple. By marrying the Duke, Edith was tying herself to a family with devilish blood running through their veins. The girl's head was spinning with these thoughts. Now she understood why such a handsome young man was still unmarried. Suddenly, Edith's attention was drawn to a young lady named Daisy. They had been friends before, but it had been a long time since they had last seen each other. Daisy introduced her friend to her little son, who looked very much like his father. Once in this world, Edith gained the ability to see a screen showing the emotional and physical state of other people. When she meets a child, their name is automatically added to her golden list, and she can track their condition. This skill is similar to a logbook. During the first meeting, it only shows the basic conditions, such as mood and well-being. Information about children appears at the right moment. Edith wondered if she should tell Daisy about her wedding. When the girl started the conversation, her friend thought she was asking for a job and told her to wait. When the word wedding was mentioned, Daisy almost fainted. Because a year ago, Edith said she didn't even want to meet anyone. Her friend began to ask who the lucky guy was who had won the girl's heart. The more details Daisy learned, the harder it was for her to believe it. She was so shocked that she couldn't collect her thoughts and almost woke her son. The girl congratulated Edith on her upcoming wedding and was excited about having a duchess as a friend for the first time. She hoped that they would still be friends after that. Daisy took her friend by the hand and expressed her concern, as high society could be very cruel, and her younger brother was imprisoned in a temple. Her friend urged Edith to think everything through carefully. Whatever the decision, Daisy wished the future duchess happiness. She was sure that if someone as kind as Edith became a person of high standing and illuminated everything around her, the world would become a better place. The girl also warned her friend that many young ladies were vying for the Duke's attention. Sitting at the Duke's gate, Edith wondered what to do. If she left, she would lose her chance to meet the magician forever. Then Elliot appeared behind her as quietly as if he had crept up on her. The girl assumed that he had teleported. However, appealing to the imperial law on magic, the Duke assured her that this was impossible. Teleportation magic is only allowed in certain cases. It also requires permission from the magic control, which must be requested 3 days in advance. Elliot decided that Edith had appeared at the gate because she had found out something about his brother. The girl shared that she had met a friend in the capital and asked her about things she did not know before. The Duke confessed that he had 5 marriage proposals for Edith, but he rejected them all. His Highness is still looking into the matter. The details are not fully known, but the number could be significantly higher. Edith was puzzled because she didn't understand why she needed this information. Moreover, Vincent had never mentioned anything like this in her presence. Elliot noted that the secretary did not want to be the cause of trouble. Finally, he was ready to hear what Edith's goal was. The Duke learned that the girl wanted to travel to another world and another time. Although this was impossible now, everything could change in 3 years. Of course, this was assuming that Edith had a clear understanding of the world and its actual existence. Elliot could not give any guarantees, but anything was possible. In 3 years, the magical flow would reach its peak. Magicians called it the day of the bloody full moon. The moon would cover the sun, and it would be the best time to interfere with the space-time continuum. Everyone who had survived such a journey had acted during this period. Edith was about to ask for help, but suddenly realized that if she returned to her world, the Duke would lose his wife. She clutched her head as if the whole plan had fallen apart. After all, Elliot would never agree. The Duke seemed to sense the girl's apprehension and said that if they planned to marry, it would only be on the condition that the marriage lasted 3 years. This would be enough time to strengthen the family's position. For 3 years, they would live as husband and wife. Elliot would do everything in his power to fulfill Edith's wish. He decided to officially propose to her, and she smiled and agreed, as if she had just made a successful deal. No matter how much Edith looked at the estate, it still seemed as magnificent as ever. She stood at the gate for a long time before resolutely taking a step forward. Now was not the time to be afraid, when she was so close to turning back. At the entrance to the building, she was met by the butler William, whom Devian's close circle simply called Will. Edith introduced herself and noted that she would now be under his care. Will pointed out that it was not appropriate for the future duchess to speak so formally to the servants. The girl understood that it would be difficult for her to get used to this, as she had never been in charge of anyone before. The man showed Edith to her bedroom. She was overwhelmed by how incredibly luxurious everything looked. When she came to her senses, the lady asked about the location of the Duke's chambers. It turned out that Elliot slept and worked far from the girl's bedroom. Therefore, Will suggested that Edith change rooms to be closer to her future husband, but the girl assured him that she was fine with everything. The butler also reminded the lady that the Duke wished to see her in his office that evening. If she needed anything, she could use the bells that were hung throughout the estate. Before Will left the lady's company, she decided to ask him more about the Duke. In his opinion, Elliot was one of those people who could achieve anything he wanted thanks to his strength. There was no task he couldn't handle, and this had been true since childhood. This was probably one of the reasons why the Duke was still single. Soon, Edith visited Elliot's study. She shared that she liked the estate so much that it exceeded her expectations. The room was spacious and grand, and the dinner was incredible. Edith asked if the Duke had had dinner. He was puzzled by such a sudden question. The girl herself did not understand what it was about, whether it was a matter of politeness or her Korean side coming out. The lady noticed that Elliot was busy and assumed that she had interrupted his meal. The Duke doubted that Edith was really that concerned, but assured her that she had nothing to worry about. He often skipped dinner because of his busy schedule. Elliot seemed so intelligent, but there was something strange and unique about him. He had invited Edith to his room so late to discuss the details of their marriage. The girl looked at the carefully drafted contract, according to which she would be the Duke's wife for exactly 3 years from the day of the wedding. The document would become invalid as soon as both parties achieved their goals. In the event that the contract could not be fulfilled, the term could be extended by mutual agreement. After all, the period when the red moon covers the sun can only be estimated. But it is impossible to determine the exact date, so the contract would last more than 3 years. The document also stated that both parties must respect each other's personal lives. However, any actions that the temple complains about are prohibited. This means that both Elliot and Edith are free to date other people. But extramarital children will cause trouble for the church. Edith knew that it was natural for nobles to have mistresses, but hearing this from her future husband was awkward. Suddenly, she realized that the Duke might have someone on the side. After all, he had asked about potential romantic relationships between them for a reason. Although the contract had not yet come into force, Elliot had a small request for cooperation. The Emperor wanted people to believe that he was not involved in this marriage, or at least that's how it should appear. His Highness had sent the Duke 2 invitations to the ball, which meant that Edith had to attend as well. The girl gladly agreed and hoped that nothing terrible would happen. Edith twirled around in her incredible dress, examining every detail. She had never worn anything like this before. She thanked Elliot for the gift, although she was still unsure whether she deserved it. The Duke remarked that the girl's doubts were misplaced. The Devian family budget included financial support for the Duchess. This did not convince Edith either, so she planned to repay his generosity when the opportunity arose. The future spouses were shown to their seats. It was an exquisite royal theater, filled with many members of the elite. Although ordinary people were not forbidden to be there, it was difficult for them to get the seats they wanted. Elliot reminded Edith of a graduate student she had known in her past life. She giggled for a moment. It seemed to her that magicians were graduate students in this world. The Duke asked why she was laughing. Edith confessed that he was very similar to someone close to her whom she no longer had contact with. Elliot then remarked that in that case, there would be no problem. The girl was surprised by this reaction, as she did not understand what the man meant. But before she could delve deeper into her thoughts, her attention was diverted by a loud argument in the main hall of the theater. The woman was dissatisfied that, despite her distinguished status, she was not allowed to watch the performance in the box. Instead, she was offered cheap, uncomfortable chairs, which seemed like a slight to the Valesia family. Next to the woman stood an 11-year-old girl. She was upset, and her readings were at a critical level. Edith restrained herself from intervening and saving the child. Instead, she had to continue watching the conflict unfold. Edith was not familiar with the Duchess of Valesia. She thought that the noisy woman was the girl. Viven Valesia is the only daughter of the Duke and the niece of the Emperor, which means she is of royal blood. But the Duke's wife does not have this status. She is the daughter of a count. Her marriage to the Duke, despite the difference in status, was a union between the noble and aristocratic hierarchies. Accordingly, the wedding outraged society. If it weren't for the Duke's first marriage, it would have been difficult to marry the Countess. But Vivian is a distant relative of the Duchess, who comes from a noble family and cannot inherit the title. The Duke cherishes the girl very much and wants to pass on his title, but this is not easy, and there are certain reasons for this. The argument continued in the hall, and Edith felt that the situation was getting out of hand. Vivian reassured her mother, saying that it was just a misunderstanding. This theater is His Highness's favorite place. He is like a brother to the girl, so they cannot neglect the Valesia family here. The woman is sure that if this were not the case, they would not continue to mess with her head. Vivian asked an employee if there was a specific reason why they were being denied seats. The man emphasized that all guest seats had been taken much earlier than usual. Indeed, it would be disrespectful to give seats that did not match the status of Valesia's guests. It was complete nonsense. Vivian decided to go outside to relax in the quiet. She didn't want to disturb others enjoying the performance. With such behavior, they didn't belong in high society. The woman decided to listen to her daughter. The employee assured her that they would be given better seats next time. However, before leaving, Vivian caught Edith's eye, and this alarmed her. The Duchess was disturbed by the girl's behavior. She suddenly jumped up when she heard the argument. Edith realized that the Duchess looked extremely exhausted, and this seriously worried her. After all, she was still a little girl. Obviously, children were treated very differently in this world, and Edith didn't like it. Elliot was impressed that the girl was trying to help the young Duchess, since it would not do her any good. Edith pointed out that she had not even thought about the benefits for herself. Soon the girl noticed that the performance was beginning, settled down comfortably, and began to watch. Elliot quietly watched his future wife's reaction. Edith was delighted with the cultural evening, but thoughts of Vivian troubled her heart to some extent. Vivian seemed to be completely emotionless, which was disturbing. At the moment when she wanted to intervene again, she realized that she was powerless to change anything. Edith felt genuine pleasure as she savored the exclusive dishes prepared by the estate's talented chef. Elliot smiled happily because he had found such a true connoisseur as her. Several days had passed since the girl had gone to see the play with Elliot. Then he left, though Edith did not know when he would return. His Highness's secretary wanted to see her. Will asked Edith what her plans were for the evening and suggested they go to the palace. Vincent had first met her on the Emperor's orders, but now he was curious to find out how Edith was settling in. Edith was delighted at the opportunity to see Elliot at the palace. Will wasted no time in preparing the carriage. She felt that the evening would be special, as their meeting had been truly significant. Vincent watched the future Duchess with admiration. Rumor has it that love can blossom even in the most difficult circumstances, and his young secretary had noticed this. The man was impressed by the story of how they met on the front lines. No one would have thought that their relationship would lead to marriage. He left the couple, wishing them a happy life together. Edith was surprised, still under the impression of the secretary's words, until Elliot explained that it was all His Highness's instructions. After all, many would be interested in how they met. The Emperor created this version to protect them from unnecessary suspicion. That is why Edith was invited to the palace, because such scenarios had to be played out to the smallest detail. The girl admitted that she had not lived near the border before, but the Duke had a few days off when her life came to a standstill for 6 months. This gap left many questions unanswered. But she was sure that they could rely on His Highness's scenario and say that they had met then. This could also explain the rumors of marriage proposals that had appeared at that time. They could say that they had lost touch for a while, but met again when Edith came to the capital. Elliot suggested discussing the exact place and time. The Duke announced that the ceremony was scheduled for this month, and although everything seems rushed, the Emperor is worried that Edith might change her mind and everything will become more complicated. Edith noted that His Highness was unaware of their agreement. She was perfectly fine with it, as she had no relatives to invite to the wedding celebration. Elliot emphasized that he also had no relatives, as his younger brother had fallen victim to a demon. As soon as all the issues are resolved, they will quickly move on to preparing for the ceremony. The event will be officially announced next week. Elliot clarified that their conversation with Edith was over and she could leave. But the girl did not plan to leave just like that. She wanted to talk some more. She decided to find out how Elliot was doing and whether he was eating properly. She also wanted to explain that she had not expressed herself correctly earlier and that this needed to be corrected. The girl was actually asking for a reason, because she didn't like that Elliot might be skipping meals because of work. Everyone knows that the Duke has been very busy lately. Elliot assured her that he was eating enough so that it wouldn't interfere with his work. And even if that's not the case, his diet has nothing to do with Edith, so there's no reason to worry. The girl was confused, having obviously asked a personal question. Or perhaps the Duke was bothered by the fact that she was asking. Edith admitted that she was only asking for safety reasons. After all, everyone around her was concerned about Elliot, who worked every day and didn't allow himself to rest properly. The Duke said that it was an inappropriate question and a complete waste of emotion. Edith was shocked by this reaction to her concern. Perhaps she was being too intrusive, as she had been told many times that she was sticking her nose into other people's business. In the end, no one would appreciate her efforts anyway. While the girl was tormenting herself with doubts, she was called to dinner. Nothing helps forget your worries like delicious food, and right now she really needed it. On her way down to the dining room, Edith ran into the Duke. She was surprised because they had recently almost argued about his diet, and now it seemed quite unexpected. Elliot appealed to the marriage contract, even though it was not yet legally binding. However, as his future wife, Edith could make requests to the Duke that she considered important. As Elliot's partner, she could ask him to be more attentive to his health. Meanwhile, he would not be able to allow her to do so, partly because he had come such a long way, from the palace to the Devian estate. Edith saw a shift in her relationship with her future husband. It seemed to her that they might be able to become friends after all. Elliot suggested that they discuss how they should address each other. The girl noted that they should maintain a formal tone when they were alone, but that this might seem strange to others. So Edith asked Elliot how he wanted her to address him. The Duke began to consider various options, including offensive words such as misogynist, indifferent, weirdo, as well as monster and rude. He explained that some people sometimes use such words, and Edith froze in shock for a moment. After that, the girl suggested that he call her simply by her first name, Scarlet. He assured her that she could call him that even when they were alone, because it would become natural over time. The girl felt awkward under his attentive gaze, which was waiting for an answer. Edith agreed, because she might not get another chance. She promised herself that she would do everything possible not to disgrace the ducal house in the future. But she also counted on her husband's support. Edith hoped that their contract would be successfully completed. Soon, newspaper headlines announced that the Duke was getting married. They reported that it was a fateful meeting between Lady Edith and the wounded Duke during the war. They promised each other they would be together. But when the man received his title, it became impossible. Edith decided that she was a burden to the Duke, so she said goodbye to him forever. Time passed, but the image of that girl would not leave the Duke's mind, and he could not understand why it had happened. The lady, watching everything, could not hold back her tears. If it weren't her story, she would have considered it romantic, but in her case, it was just a disgrace that had been splashed across the newspapers. She didn't even want to imagine how her friends would look at her. But at the same time, she wondered if the Duke knew about the situation and how he reacted to all the events that unfolded. Aaron asked if the Duke was really going to marry Edith. He didn't know about it. He was just telling the lady about the magic code and was surprised at how foolish he looked at that moment. He was sure that the girl couldn't have reacted that way. After all, of all the people he knew, Edith was the kindest. She always treated everyone around her with respect. Edith never judged people by their status and never acted out of self-interest. She treated everyone as if she were simply doing her usual good deeds, and it came naturally to her. The Duke, lost in his thoughts, didn't even hear Aaron calling him. The magician said it was time, as lunch would be served soon, and he had to get up and go. Elliot quickly got up, as he had to fulfill his contractual obligations. He realized that he needed to pay closer attention to everything going on around him. The wedding day had finally arrived. Everything looked incredibly beautiful, with fresh flowers blooming everywhere. Edith was wearing a luxurious white dress and holding a bouquet of beautiful roses in her hands. The girl was captivated by the Duke's appearance. If she had known that he would be dressed so luxuriously, she would have prepared herself better. Elliot assured her that the most important thing in appearance was balance, and he was convinced that the girl looked harmonious. Edith blushed, realizing that the Duke had just called her beautiful. The man also noted that there are cultural and natural aspects to beauty. There are also differences caused by general perceptions. He was ready to discuss this with the girl, but she said that she understood everything. Still, she was curious about the standards of beauty in Robedium. They were probably different in the capital, not like in her native land. Edith took Elliot by the hand and asked him to tell her about it someday. The girl was excited that in 3 years she would become a real expert in this field and would have something to tell her children. The bride and groom entered the hall. All eyes were fixed on the future spouses. It was time for the emperor to bless their marriage. But first, he had to deliver a speech. Elliot and Edith were surprised by the sudden appearance of His Highness. After all, it had been previously stated that he could not attend the ceremony. The emperor was the last defender of the honor of the Robedium aristocracy. Therefore, it was a great honor for him to bless the union of his friend and hero, Duke Devian, who was destined to lead the country into a new phase of history. He could not imagine a more magnificent moment in his life. Many of those present shared the emperor's opinion. After all, they had come a long way. There were also many new faces here, but none of the nobility. This was probably a protest against Duke Devian, an attempt to undermine his position as a representative of the imperial side. While the emperor was delivering his speech, Edith studied everyone around her. And then she caught the eye of the Duchess of Valencia. The girl was completely focused. However, her sympathy rarely waned, and Edith did not understand what she had done wrong because they had not even spoken to each other. Elliot noticed his future wife's confusion, but she assured him that everything was fine. A year had passed since Robedium had established his rule on the continent. It seemed like it had been going on for years, but in reality it had flown by in an instant. A decade before the war began, many people had worked hard to get the empire to where it was now. Some names remained nameless, not even preserved in memory. The emperor declared that without exaggeration, the current majesty of Robedium had been created by the sweat and blood of those people. His Highness emphasized that the heroes must be remembered. But through many trials and tribulations, the empire had returned to great joy. The emperor enthusiastically blessed the couple, Duke Elliot and Lady Edith. After the wedding, the tired girl relaxed in the bathroom. She definitely did not want to get married again. The banquet was not so luxurious, but she was still tired. The Duchess's current state worried Edith. She hadn't even managed to talk to Viven, but there was nothing she could do about it. Suddenly, the girl heard a knock at the door. Edith assumed it was the butler, Will, and since she was still awake, she decided to let him in. But when she opened the door, she saw the Duke standing in the hallway. She didn't expect to see him at such a late hour, but since they were now husband and wife, Scarlet had come to fulfill his marital duty. Edith was confused by the Duke's intentions. It was late at night, 2 newlyweds in the bedroom, and a man who had just come out of the bathroom. Imagining this scene, the girl almost fainted. She squealed that she wasn't ready. Scarlet noted that he would be away from the estate for a whole month starting tomorrow. He had to leave. The decision had been made on the spur of the moment. His trip would probably be delayed, depending on circumstances, but the Duke would let her know if that happened. He asked if Edith needed time to prepare for his departure. Scarlet remarked that if it was important, he would discuss it with her before making a decision. Edith assured him that it was not that. She felt that he meant something else. The girl felt awkward saying it out loud. She believed that the Duke was planning to conceive an heir. However, Scarlet pointed out that she need not worry, as he wanted the Devian family line to end with him. He was convinced that no one would object, not even the church. The man decided to change the subject. He had heard that Edith was planning to host a tea party. The girl thought that this was a mandatory gesture after the wedding. The Duke reassured his wife that there was no need to do this unless she wanted to. Edith had once mentioned that she had never participated in social life. And you can tell by looking at her that it's not in her nature. As a duchess, she should focus on her duties. Scarlet asked her not to try too hard to be perfect. It seemed that this was not easy for Edith, and the Duke did not want to put pressure on her. The girl smiled happily at this kind gesture from her husband. His tone was very soft. But at the same time, he looked as if he was putting up a barrier out of fear of possible conflict. That's how you usually talk to children. It turns out that the Duke wanted to say that he would not be disappointed in Edith, even if she was not perfect in everything. The tea party was planned by the newly married noblewoman. In reality, it was not as simple as it might seem from the name. It was an important event that demonstrated the taste and status of the new hostess. Still, Edith planned to throw a nice party, and it was important to her what kind of tablecloth would be on the table. After all, this would determine how she would be perceived in high society. The Duchess couldn't imagine that she would have to deal with so many things, and accepting money from another person is never easy. Invitations were sent to every family. A reply came from Valencia. The Duchess felt bad, but her daughter would be there. This was good news, and Edith felt calmer knowing that there were no refusals. The newly minted Duchess was delighted that things were going much better than she had expected, especially considering that this was her first tea party, and all that was left was to wait for the guests. But when the time came, no one showed up. Edith had already thought that the doorbell was broken, but then letters arrived from the families who were supposed to come. None of the invited guests were planning to come to the tea party. To smooth things over, gifts were sent along with the letters of refusal. Will had suspected that something like this might happen, but he dismissed the negative thoughts. Over the years, he had realized that unexpected events happen more often than not. This is what learning from experience is all about. Edith saw an opportunity in this, as she could sell all the gifts. The ladies who did not attend the newly minted Duchess's event discussed how naive she was to invite the Grand Duke's daughter. They did not consider Edith to be the head of the Devian household, and the young Duchess's behavior at the wedding shocked them, especially her arrogance and confidence, even though her position was only accidental. Viven could not stand the gossip and demonstratively slammed her cup on the saucer. After that, she declared that although they were unable to attend the tea party, the event was still worthy of their attention. It would be rude of them to leave things as they were. Therefore, the girl suggested inviting the Duchess to the ball. Edith distributed all the food that had been intended for the tea party to the residents of the duchy. Exhausted from hard work, the elderly man and woman did not even know how to thank the Duchess for her kindness. But in reality, she was more concerned about the children, because if they were happy, that would be the best gift. She knew how nice it was. Once upon a time, she and her younger sister had enjoyed little surprises just like that. The children approached the table hesitantly and accepted the treats. Their guardians asked them not to overeat, otherwise their stomachs would hurt. There were many different delicacies, cakes, and soft pastries that looked so delicious, as if they had been brought from the fairy tale about Hansel and Gretel. The children were delighted, even the chef, because everyone was enjoying his masterpieces. But there was one boy who didn't eat anything and only asked to take something with him. Edith offered to give him as much as he wanted. His name was Pin. His teacher was looking for him everywhere. As soon as the boy heard that he was being looked for, he jumped up and ran away. Edith stopped the woman and asked her to give her son some time. An elderly man remarked that Pin had not been like this before. After his sister Lucy was adopted by a new family, he began to withdraw. They didn't force children who didn't want to go. In fact, they were against it. But Pin himself insisted that his sister be adopted, saying that she would have a good life. The teachers were upset that the boy had shown the Duchess the side of him they didn't want her to see. Edith reassured them, saying that everything was fine. Soon she went to look for the boy in the garden. He was sitting sadly on a tree and did not expect to be found. Pin did not understand where the Duchess got so much free time. Edith remarked that she didn't have much to do, but she had a lot of money, but that was a secret. The boy was also unsure whether the Duchess could stay here with him. The girl said that if he kept it a secret, then it was okay. Pin replied that he was quite talkative, but that's what Edith wants, because she wants to learn more about the sad boy. Pin asked the lady where she got the money. She confessed that she had recently gotten married. After that, she sent out invitations to a tea party to celebrate. However, no one came, and to apologize, all the families sent numerous gifts. Pin emphasized that it looked like a boycott. But thanks to this, the Duchess received money practically out of thin air. Edith emphasized to the boy that even if you give money, it does not justify bullying people. Pin noted that he had nothing to give the lady, but if only he had. He was curious how the Duchess had found him. Edith confessed that as a child, when she wanted to be alone, she would go to places like this. Back then, the young girl dreamed of disappearing. At the same time, she was afraid that one day she would cross the line. She couldn't leave because she had a sister who was like an angel, sweet and kind. Edith wanted to take her with her, but now she is one of those stars in the sky that light the way. Not a day goes by without the girl thinking about her sister. Pete also misses Lucy very much. His sister didn't want to leave, and the boy told her that she would be able to wear beautiful clothes and enjoy good food. However, she stubbornly refused. The boy blamed himself for not being able to be with Lucy because of his age, so he lied that he was going to live with another family. If she stayed, he wouldn't be able to leave. Pete didn't regret anything because he wanted a better life for his sister. But as they said goodbye, Lucy whispered, "I'm sorry," to her brother so quietly and secretly that only he could hear. The boy was most afraid that his sister would think he had abandoned her. Pete saw an opportunity in the Duchess, because now she could meet with noble families. So he asked Edith if she ever visited the Earl of Menhir's house to give Lucy a few words from him. Edith visited Daisy. She apologized to her friend for not being able to invite her to the wedding, but Daisy assured her that she was not angry, because she had heard that the Emperor would be there. And she tries to avoid such grand events. Daisy asked about the Duchess's affairs, as she had heard that no one had come to her tea party. The girl remembered that Edith had previously asked her to find her a job. Lady Letta learned that the Duchess had applied for the position of governess. The Countess noticed this when she was reviewing other candidates. The job of a governess is often seen as the fate of women from impoverished noble families who have trouble getting married. Edith wanted to change this stereotype. Daisy asked to meet with the Countess on her friend's behalf. Edith was very grateful for the help. She really appreciated it. Will noticed that the rest of the gifts were stored in the pantry and asked if the Duchess would like to come down and take a look. The girl wasn't sure if she should. The Duke ordered everyone to treat Edith as the mistress of the house. Therefore, her rights must be fully respected. Will offered to show the lady to the pantry. Edith was amazed by what she saw. It looked like she was in a museum. The butler assured her that the Duchess could take her time looking around and call him if she needed anything. Even after the donation to the orphanage, there were still many gifts left. If a few more events were held, enough charitable funds could be raised for the whole year. Among the old things, Edith found a portrait. It was of a boy with beautiful pink hair next to a woman. She assumed it was Elliot. The lady remarked that even in his youth, the Duke stood out from the rest, and she herself was also an incredibly attractive woman. Edith heard something fall. Looking around, she noticed a servant. The man informed her that the Duke had returned to the estate. Edith immediately asked how Elliot's trip had gone. The Duke assured her that everything had gone according to plan. The girl did not forget to ask if he had brought her anything. Then she realized that it was probably pointless, and immediately covered her mouth with her hand, emphasizing her mistake. Elliot looked intently at his wife, then noted that he had taken breaks for lunch whenever possible. He reminded her that they had discussed this before. Then he asked Edith the same question. The girl replied that everything was fine. The Duke emphasized that maintaining good health was crucial to the successful completion of their contract. Elliot firmly suggested that they have dinner together. During the meal, the man shared that he had been on a mission in Karantri. The area was significantly different from the Empire. It was warmer than in the southern part, and the climate was dry with particularly hot summers. Because of this, the skin of the locals was darker than here. People were also generally taller and slimmer, regardless of gender. Edith listened attentively to every word her husband said. She was pleased, though surprised, that he had suddenly started sharing details. The chef served a special meat pie. The Duchess admitted that the dish was incredibly delicious and that the children had enjoyed it too. Elliot was puzzled, not understanding which children his wife was talking about. Enid shared that her tea party had not gone according to plan, as none of the guests had shown up. She said this in a sad tone, as she did not want to tarnish the reputation of the ducal house. The Duke reminded her not to have high expectations, but also asked if perhaps Edith had not prepared enough. However, she had put all her energy into the party. Of course, the Duchess could not say that it had been the best tea party ever, but at least she had tried not to embarrass her family in front of others. But the plan did not work out. She did not understand this at the time, but she learned a valuable lesson. Now the girl will know what to do if something like this happens again. Elliot noted that he had rejected the memory of the marriage proposals. This happened after he received the title of Minister of Magic. Therefore, it would be difficult to ruin his reputation. The man assured her that Enid was not to blame. After that, the girl breathed a sigh of relief. It turns out that Elliot knows how to be supportive. The Duke awkwardly took a sip from his glass and noted that these were just facts. Edith assured him that whatever the case, they were glad to hear it. Soon the Duchess received a letter from the Valencia family. She was so surprised to be invited to the event that her hair almost stood on end. The girl assumed that it was all thanks to Daisy, who was close to Lady Letitia and the Duchess of Valencia. She was upset that she would be entering high society in this way, but she had to go. Edith was worried that Duchess Vivian did not like her. She replayed the situation over and over in her head, and thoughts of her younger sister kept popping into her mind. A few days later, Edith finally went to tea at the Valencia estate. All the young ladies were waiting for the main guest, and before that, they were discussing the latest gossip in the empire. Vivian was worried that the Duchess was offended by them and would not come to her party, so she immediately approached Enid as soon as she saw her. The girl noticed that the girl's dress was too mature. The young lady thought that the Duchess liked her outfit, so she turned around so that she could take a closer look. Vivian mentioned that she and her friends had gathered a little earlier to start tea. They hoped that Edith would understand and not be offended. Small talk continued, and the Duchess just watched. She was new here and didn't know anyone, so she had nothing to add. In wealthy families, everything is different. She really liked the cake and wished their cook would make one like it. Suddenly, everyone's attention turned to Edith. The young ladies had heard that the Duchess loved to talk and care for children. What's more, she taught many of them. The other girl didn't understand what this meant and assumed that Edith was a former governess. It's not hard to guess that it was Letitia who started this conversation. After all, she was the one who negotiated Scarlett's marriage, and she probably still hadn't forgotten it. Letitia added that her mother was looking for someone to take care of her second child. She spoke as if she wanted to humiliate Edith, and if she had known the Duchess's maiden name, she would have recommended her to her mother. Vivian intervened, pointing out to Letitia that it was rude to say such things to the Duchess. She then cast a suspicious glance at Edith. It was clear that the girl wanted to hear everything from the source. The Duchess confirmed Letitia's words. After all, before coming to the capital, she had been a governess. Someone in the company exclaimed that this was quite shameful for a duchess. Edith declared that she really loved children and enjoyed working with them. She decided to play to the audience and say that it was thanks to this job that she had met Scarlett. The young ladies were impressed. The Duchess explained that she felt more comfortable addressing her husband by his first name. Edith added that she had met Scarlett when she was still in the barony. If she hadn't stayed there, it would never have happened. Edith was proud of herself for coming up with such a brilliant story. Vivian abruptly rose from her seat. When asked where the young princess was going, she replied that she needed to see her mother. Edith felt awkward and out of place. Noble children are often raised in strict conditions, but Vivian sometimes goes too far. If she continues to behave this way, it will be difficult to build a dialogue with Edith. The Duchess was strolling through the garden and became so engrossed that she did not notice she had entered the maze. The society ladies had recently mentioned it. They were eager to see it, but Vivian said it wasn't ready yet. It had recently been rebuilt, and she would invite the young ladies to walk through it later. Edith suggested that she could walk through the hedge. As soon as she touched it, she was frightened by something and immediately stepped back. It was a puppy. Edith herself had taught her children to be careful with animals, but this dog was very cute. The Duchess noticed a leash, which meant it had an owner. And at first glance, you could tell that this was no ordinary mutt, but small puppies were kept inside the estate. Edith picked up the animal and went in search of its owner. Suddenly, the Duchess heard a commotion. It turned out that Vivian was calling someone named Becca. When she saw Edith holding the puppy, the girl's expression immediately changed. Vivian was furious that the Duchess had dared to bring an animal into someone else's estate without warning. She told Edith to leave quickly so that the Duchess would not see her mother. The girl did not even have a chance to explain everything to the young lady, so she had to take the puppy with her, but she immediately realized that Vivian had been looking after it. Edith couldn't understand why the girl was pretending to see the puppy, BQ, for the first time. Even if the Duchess hated animals, Vivian could easily have asked for at least one. Could the girl have been secretly keeping Becca and planning to give her away as soon as the others found out? But her look at that moment was frightened. Edith apologized to the Duke for bringing the puppy without consulting him first. She would find a home for him soon, but until then the animal would live here. The Duchess was concerned that Scarlett would be against it, as he did not like pets, but surprisingly he agreed. The man confessed that he actually hated animals. Apparently he had never had any, although he had heard about someone raising a pet. Edith was surprised and asked who it was. Scarlett said it was his mother. The girl then admitted that she had seen a portrait of him as a child with his mother. The Duke was surprised and began to ask for details. From the shade of his hair, he realized that it was not him or his mother. It was his younger brother, Christian Emmett Mole. Scarlett felt sick at the mention of this. but he tried not to show it to Edith. The Duchess, in turn, realized that she had crossed a line. After all, a brother is something sacred to a duke. Duke Elliot and the Emperor were strolling through the greenhouse. His Highness remarked that when a room is cluttered in the right way, it is difficult for noise to escape. The Emperor invited the Duke to inform him that the Tower of Magicians would open its doors for the second year in a row. This is a test inside the tower, which is conducted irregularly. They are known for their short announcements and even shorter trial periods. Participants are required to demonstrate not only skill, but also great luck. Or, in other words, they must possess skills that overshadow any luck. Accordingly, His Highness wanted the Duke to find talented magicians, but this would be much more difficult than it seemed. Since the participants could not be represented by any state, there was nothing that could be done. Moreover, after that incident, they added a new condition. His Highness warned that the Archmage would have a difficult task ahead of him. Scarlet noted with concern that he had not yet achieved that status. The Emperor also mentioned that there had been activity in Malo. Therefore, Scarlet would probably have to go there. The Duke suggested that this was the work of the Shadowed Ones. His Highness confirmed that these could be renegades who were profiting from looting. He immediately apologized to Scarlet for having to postpone the happy period of the newlyweds and said that he would send the Duchess a gift as an apology. The Emperor asked the Duke to tell him what Edith liked so that he could choose a better gift. Scarlet was puzzled, as he was not yet familiar with his wife's preferences. His Highness was surprised that the Duke did not know such simple things. He hoped that the couple at least communicated with each other. Scarlet replied that they only did so when necessary. The man recalled how Edith had previously shared that she was not yet fully familiar with the standards of beauty in Rhodium and reflected on this. The Emperor thought that pearls would be perfect for the Duchess. He hoped that this meant that the lady would be upset, as she would have to attend the spring ball alone while Scarlet was away. The Duke was not sure if this would really make his wife uncomfortable. His Highness was convinced that the Duchess, who had only recently married, would appear at the ball alone, which would attract unnecessary attention. But even if Scarlet decides to accompany Edith, the consequences for the Duchess will be more dire. The Emperor decided to advise his husband not to dwell on these thoughts. He is confident that the Duchess understands her role perfectly well. After all, she has already paid a high price. Interestingly, the situation may turn out in a completely unexpected way. For the first time, a name appeared on Edith's golden list, without a personal meeting. Scarlet explained at the time that the woman in the portrait was the second wife of Earl Mole, and Christian was their son. The Duke was taciturn and referred to his father as Count Molt. However, his full name is Scarlet Elliot Devian, and he does not bear the surname Molt. Edith realized that the situation in the Duke's family was complicated, and that she should not bring up the subject. The Molts were not at the recent event, and they are not part of the capital's aristocracy. Christian and Scarlet are stepbrothers, and Edith does not know much about her husband yet. She would very much like to lift the veil of mystery surrounding the Duke, but she has no idea how to do it. The girl went out into the garden to play with Becky. She wanted to teach the dog to fetch a ball. While doing so, Edith wondered how Viven could so easily part with her friend. Soon, the Duke arrived in the courtyard. He usually came later, but this time he had received news that he wanted to share with his wife and say goodbye to her before leaving. Edith felt a little indignant, as her husband had been on a mission not long ago, and it must have been very tiring for him. Scarlet assured her that he was getting enough sleep. He would not allow his health to deteriorate to the point where it would affect the fulfillment of his contract. Edith clutched her dress tightly and said that was not what was bothering her. She was worried about Scarlet, perhaps because she hadn't spent time with anyone in a long time, or because they would have to share a roof for another 3 years. It could also be due to excessive emotions, as the Duke himself had once pointed out. In any case, the girl was very worried. Edith asked her husband to take care of himself. It was her way of cheering Scarlet up. The Duke silently watched his wife, then asked her what she liked. The girl was embarrassed, then replied that she liked many things. She also asked her husband the same question. Scarlet admitted that he had never thought about it. Then Edith suggested that as soon as he returned, they would sit down and talk about it. The Duchess reminded her husband that she was still waiting for him to tell her about the local standards of beauty. Scarlet said that he had not forgotten about it for a moment. Soon the Duke left for Mello. Time flew by quickly, and there were only a few days left until the spring ball. Edith was concerned that her dress would meet the standards of the local nobility. The butler had to disturb the lady late in the evening because he had to deliver a book from the Duke. It turned out that he would be delayed on his trip, and therefore could not give it to his wife in person. At first, Edith did not understand why he needed the book until she read what it was about. Scarlett took the girl's request seriously and, in 10 days, wrote a guide to aesthetic standards himself. In his note, the Duke said that due to time constraints, he had omitted some details, but if Edith had any questions, she should not hesitate to ask. The girl smiled, realizing how amazing Scarlett was. The day of the ball arrived, and Edith, dressed in a luxurious gown, slowly descended the stairs so that high society could see her. But instead of admiring exclamations, negative comments filled the hall. The young ladies believed that Edith, a girl from the countryside, had clouded the Duke's mind. Letitia noticed that Mrs. Devian had left the Valesian tea party without even informing the Grand Duchess. Her companion added that Edith was a pitiful governess. Therefore, she probably didn't know the basic rules of etiquette. The girl couldn't stand the gossip and left the hall. The young ladies just laughed after her. Vivian, on the other hand, stood silently and watched everything with slight disappointment. Edith went out into the garden to stretch her legs, as it was difficult to maintain her posture. In fact, she was expecting direct attacks on her, but the women were surprisingly passive. All she could do was return and greet His Highness and thank him for the gift. The Duchess heard a commotion nearby. Checking the source of the noise, she found Mrs. Standen trying unsuccessfully to calm her daughter. Edith had heard rumors about the woman. After the death of her husband, Viscount Standen, she had run several successful businesses and raised her daughter. Now the woman did not understand why Evelina, who behaved perfectly at home, could not do so in public. Mrs. Stenden told her daughter to stop throwing a tantrum and crying. Edith noticed that Evelina was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. She was determined to intervene. The Duchess stepped forward so that the mother and daughter could see her. Viscountess Standen was initially taken aback, but then tried to pull herself together. She greeted Edith and then whispered to Evelina to show good manners and do the same. The girl was in a panic and could barely speak. Mrs. Devian apologized for interfering, but she couldn't help but notice the awkward situation. She politely asked the Viscountess to take her daughter by the hand so that she would feel safe. Edith had encountered similar situations many times before, although being a governess was not something to be proud of these days. The woman listened to the Duchess, although her face twisted in surprise. The girl hoped that Mrs. Standen would be gentler with her daughter in the future. The woman was indignant, thinking that someone was trying to shame her. But the girl squeezed her mother's hand, and the Viscountess realized that Edith was right. At home, Evelina's behavior was impeccable, but she was nervous around strangers. The Viscountess noted that her daughter had been shy since childhood, and suggested that if she had paid more attention to her child back then, everything would have been different. Edith assured the woman that it was because Evelina was afraid. Mrs. Standen was angered by this remark, as she would never have harmed her daughter. The Duchess understands that the mother wants only the best future for her child. That is why she always wanted to protect Evelina from the difficulties of city life and tried to provide her with comfort. Edith knows that the Viscountess is a successful businesswoman. She has had to deal with many people, and this has probably affected the girl. Mrs. Standen agreed because after her husband's death, she realized that things could not go on like this. She began to seek advice in search of knowledge. However, there has never been a situation that could harm Evelina. The woman always kept her daughter close to her. Edith asked a provocative question about how the girl greeted guests. The Viscountess wanted to confidently answer that there were no problems with this, but suddenly some unpleasant memories came to mind. It turned out that Evelina always tried to find excuses not to see strangers. The Duchess noted that the girl needed more time to adapt to the world. Mrs. Stenden did not realize that she was putting pressure on her daughter when she told her that she was lagging behind her peers and that she needed to work harder. Most importantly, she emphasized that she should stop acting like a child. The woman did all this for Evelina's well-being and did not notice how her high ambitions were causing her daughter to suffer. Edith advised her to hold the girl's hand more often, or better yet, tell her that everything was fine. The Viscountess should let her daughter know that she is always there for her, and then her fears will disappear. The woman asked Evelina once again to greet the Duchess, but this time supporting her. The girl asked her mother not to be upset because she would try to greet everyone. Mrs. Stendon assured her daughter that everything was fine and suggested leaving early so they could spend more time together. She also promised Evelina that from now on she would be more attentive to her. Edith was glad that she was able to help the mother and daughter, but at the same time she understood that it was not right to interfere in other people's affairs. But she couldn't do anything about her curiosity. At that moment, Vivian was hiding nearby, watching the Duchess of Devian's every move. Later it became known that the young lady had asked to visit Edith. Upon the guest's arrival, the Duchess noticed that she had grown fond of her. The girl invited Vivian to enjoy tea and pastries while they talked. The girl was uncomfortable, as she felt awkward apologizing for her recent behavior. Then, near the maze, she had caused a misunderstanding and created problems. Edith asked her to share the real reason for her visit. It was clear that it was to take Becky back. Vivian confirmed that there was another motive, but insisted that it was not her dog. She assured them that Becky had been raised by her young maid. And since there were rarely any people in the maze, she assumed that no one would find out. The puppy was very friendly and playful, even with strangers. Vivian was also surprised that such an absurd idea had occurred to the maid. The girl noted that she had already reprimanded the maid, and hoped that the Duchess would understand her position. Edith said that there was nothing wrong with that if the girl was young. Vivian believed that age did not excuse rash actions. The Duchess agreed, but she could see that the maid really cared about the puppy. After that, the young lady turned pale and nervously clutched her dress. Edith placed the collar on the table and remarked that this was a very responsible approach for a child. Vivian recalled how she first saw Becky. At that time, Lady Hayes had brought several puppies to the estate in the hope of giving them to her closest friends. They were a newly bred breed from the Duchy of Radius. Hayes's father had studied there in his youth. The lady offered Vivian one of the cutest puppies. The girl firmly stated that her mother did not like fluffy animals. Hayes emphasized that this was a very intelligent and energetic breed of dog. Vivian sat silently, wondering what would happen to the puppies if they were not lucky enough to find a family. In the end, the girl couldn't resist and took Becky home with her. For the first time in her life, she disobeyed her parents and brought the puppy to the estate, but she enjoyed spending time with him. Vivian is ready to apologize for her rudeness that day and will have to take Becky back. She doesn't want the puppy to cause trouble for the Duchess. Edith asked what the young lady was going to do next, because sooner or later, someone would find the pet, and then Vivian seemed to go crazy from having her sore spot touched. Her eyes hit a child who desperately needed support. Edith suggests that the young lady understands all the risks, but that it is normal for someone her age to act impulsively. The Duchess is convinced that 11 is an age of carefree desires. Vivian is immediately overcome with flashbacks. Her mother constantly reminded her that she had royal blood running through her veins. And the future of their family is in Vivian's hands, so she must not allow anyone to look down on them. From an early age, she has done everything for the well-being of her family. No one even thinks about what the girl really wants. Becky ran into the room and immediately touched Vivian's hand, and she instantly burst into tears of joy. Although the girl knew that the dog would be found sooner or later, she wanted the best for him. And in Edith's opinion, that was worthy of respect. But if Vivian took Becky away, it could cause problems. The Duchess offered to keep him at her estate until the situation changed. In the meantime, Vivian would be able to visit him at any time. The young lady seemed to have finally understood why she had been unable to be around Edith all this time. After all, she felt like she could behave like a child around the Duchess. Vivian said goodbye to Becky and apologized to the Duchess for the inconvenience. Edith reminded her that she was not joking when she said she would welcome the young lady at any time. The girl could finally breathe a sigh of relief, because at least she had managed to solve an urgent problem. But then a new task appeared before her. Until now, she had only received messages describing the child's status. Now Edith had to fulfill a condition, but she couldn't understand who was sending it to her or why. Everything was becoming increasingly confusing. The request appeared after the Duchess had established a relationship with Vivian. Therefore, it was logical to assume that the task was directly related to her. But that was far from certain. If it concerned Miss Vasiliska specifically, the message would have said so. Edith needed to be absolutely sure. The fullness of the hearts also changed depending on the child's condition. And if that was how it worked, Edith needed to fill them all to increase the happiness index. What worried the Duchess most was the appearance of a sign with the demon-possessed Christian. and if his condition depends on the tasks he receives, Edith doesn't even know how to complete them. Finally, Elliot returned from his task. He had dealt with the three magicians himself. The only thing that reassured him was that nothing remarkable had happened in the last battle. Edith ran happily toward her husband. She couldn't wait to share her impressions of his book. Not much time had passed, but she had managed to familiarize herself with his work. The Duchess was impressed that Scarlett had managed to write a book in such a short time. It seemed to her that only true hard workers could become magicians. Her husband noted that talent was necessary first and foremost, and not everyone had it. Edith was sure that perseverance was also important, as he had probably worked hard to become a powerful magician. Scarlett recalled how his achievements had previously been attributed to a gift rather than hard work. The Duchess shared that after reading the book, she left a short review. She wrote the note spontaneously because she enjoyed reading it, but assured her husband that he didn't have to read it. Scarlett firmly stated that he wanted to. Edith thanked the Duke for caring for her. She knows that he has a lot of work to do, but he still found the time to write her this book, which she thoroughly enjoyed. Her husband did not respond to her words of praise for a long time, until Edith noticed that he was blushing, and every time he felt this emotion, he immediately lowered his gaze. Scarlett told his wife that he had to ask her for forgiveness. When he said he didn't expect anything grand from her, he greatly underestimated her social skills. He was informed that Mrs. Valicia had recently visited the estate, and that Edith had managed to establish a friendly relationship with the Viscountess Standen during the ball. The Duchess had not wasted any time in trying to build strong connections. It was clear that her husband had jumped to conclusions about her. Edith assured him that there was no need to apologize, even though it was a very kind gesture on Scarlett's part. In fact, she still felt that she had not fully adapted to life among the elite. Her friendship with Mrs. Standen was purely coincidental. Edith had witnessed her difficult relationship with her daughter. The Duke did not understand why his wife was so concerned about the problems of those around her. She was not like those who tried to gain personal advantage from such situations. When Scarlett read a review of his book, Aaron was very interested in what he did. He was very surprised to learn that it had nothing to do with magic. The book stated that the shorter a man's legs are, the more attractive he is. But Edith is convinced that this is not the case with Scarlett. The Duchess assured him that everything she did for other people was primarily for herself. The Duke, on the other hand, felt that such actions were somehow related to financial expenses and time. Therefore, he did not understand how this benefited his wife. Edith wants all troubled hearts to stop feeling discomfort. This made Scarlett think. The Viscountess of Stanhope shared with her friends that the Duchess had helped her mend her relationship with her daughter. They, in turn, wanted to meet Edith, as they also had certain problems. The new acquaintance gladly welcomed the Duchess into her home. She was just as she had imagined her. The woman paid several compliments to Edith's appearance. It was Countess Sophia and her husband, Count Hartman. They had been friends with Mrs. Stenden since childhood. Edith wondered if the Count had met her husband. Sophia noted that they had not had a chance to talk formally, but it seemed that they had seen each other 2 years ago. She suggested continuing their conversation in a more comfortable place. In any case, if they had met, Scarlett was not yet a duke. The Countess did not know that her friend Melanie had been through such a tragedy, but she was glad that Edith had helped her out of the crisis. The Duchess assured her that the credit for this belonged to Mrs. Standen and her daughter. The Viscountess said she was very grateful to the lady. After all, if they hadn't met that day, she and Evelina would have drifted even further apart. The Viscountess hoped that Edith would also be able to help the Hartman family. The man shared that they have 2 sons. The older one is 6 years old, and the younger one is barely 3 months old. At that moment, the maid interrupted the peaceful conversation. She informed the hosts that their older son had suddenly woken up. The Count assured her that everything was fine. The boy rushed into his father's arms, then greeted the guest. His name was Elliot, and he turned out to be very talkative and sociable, and immediately struck up a conversation with Edith. Elliot hoped that the Duchess was friends with his mom and dad. The lady smiled and said that although not much time had passed, she had already become friends with them. Edith noticed the boy's condition, but everything seemed fine. She assumed that the younger son needed help, but decided to wait and see what the family would say. Suddenly, the Countess heard a child crying. She realized that Joel's younger son had woken up and went to check on him. Elliot's vitals had deteriorated sharply. The boy grabbed his mother's dress, not wanting to let her go. There was panic in his eyes. He hoped that Sophia would stay, since their guest was still there. Moreover, he had been promised that someone would look after Joel until the end of his art class. Edith watched the scene and immediately understood what was going on. The Hartman family assured the Duchess that Elliot was well behaved, but when it came to his younger brother, he began to act out. It seemed that he did not like the very fact of Joel's existence. Edith had not noticed any disrespect towards Elliot, so she did not understand why the boy was so upset about his brother. She decided to talk to him to get to the bottom of it. Elliot showed her a drawing he had done of his family, which included him and his parents. Everyone was smiling and looked happy, but for some reason, Joel was not in the picture. The boy shared that his parents used to play with him a lot. His dad would play tag with him, and when they got tired, they would eat sandwiches. They spent more time together. But now it rarely happens, and they even have much less fun. When his grandparents come to visit, they always go to see Joel. That's why Elliot felt like no one needed him anymore. He wanted his little brother to disappear. Edith was puzzled when she heard the unhappy child's story. After the boy fell asleep, the Duchess went to the Hartman family to talk. She said that her son was not yet ready to accept his younger brother as a member of the family. Before jumping to any conclusions, Edith asked if the family was planning to have a second child. The Count said that it was not a coincidence. They had always wanted Elliot to have a brother. As a child, the Hartmans did not feel lonely because they had friends. Their eldest son did not have any close friends, and this worried them. Therefore, they decided that it would be good to have a little brother or sister.